Hello! So this video is either an explanation or a recap, depending on where you are, of using reflexive verbs in French with the perfect tense. And so a little reminder, the perfect tense is when you talk about the past. So present is here, past would be before. We're going to look at perfect tense reflexive verbs in positive statements and in negative statements. So something you didn't do. Okay, let's have a look. So firstly, a little reminder. So infinitive of the verb is what you would find in a dictionary. This is what you will have in your verb lists. It will start with se, which means oneself. This will need to change once you conjugate the verb, once you give the verb a subject. Okay, and it is made of the reflexive pronoun. These are the words we're going to be using. An infinitive verb. Remember that there's a number of verbs which can be reflexive or not. It will simply change slightly the meaning. So here we have se laver, to wash oneself. If I didn't have the reflexive pronoun, laver means simply to wash, like a dog, a car, etc. Okay, so there's lots of examples that you might have in your lists. So let's start. So firstly, reflexive verbs in the present tense. Very, very rapid recap. We have the subject, reflexive pronoun, and the conjugated verb in this order. And then in the perfect tense, we're going to keep the same order. Subject, reflexive pronoun, and conjugated verb. The difference with the perfect tense is that the perfect tense has two parts in its conjugated verb. And these parts are called, it's important we use these terms, the auxiliary and the past participle. Notice I wrote conjugated auxiliary. This will be relevant later. I said conjugated auxiliary because conjugating means matching a verb to its subject. And suis is the one that matches the subject. This here, the past participle, will be the same whatever the subject is as long as it's in the past perfect tense. Okay? So you might say tu t'es lavé, il s'est lavé. Past participle will not change. This is what will change. The auxiliary is what's conjugated. This will be relevant later. So, je me suis lavé, subject, reflexive pronoun, and then your verb, which is made out of conjugated auxiliary and the past participle. Okay? A good tip is that all reflexive verbs use être as an auxiliary. So, laver on its own, if you find it in a dictionary, it's a regular verb. It's not a verb that would on its own use être. However, because it's a reflexive verb, it does. So a good way to look at it is if you want to use a verb in the perfect tense and you spot that it's reflexive, you don't even have to look at your list and decide which one it is. It uses être as an auxiliary, always, always. Because it uses être as an auxiliary, it effectively kind of acts as a description, doesn't it? So if I was to translate it literally, I myself am washed. And so that washed is kind of describing me, isn't it? Because I've used être. So that's just, it's just explaining to you a way to remember that, as we know, and I will sing it if I must, adjectives must agree with nouns that they modify, or with pronouns that they modify. And please look up the song if you miss it. So it means that I would make this past participle agree with the subject. So in gender or in number, so I might add an E or an S. This is a bit more advanced. It is in your reference material. It's simply that I'm telling you here that you must remember to use it. Okay, so lots of things to remember. Subject, reflexive pronoun, which matches the subject. Conjugated auxiliary, which matches the subject as well. This auxiliary is always être with reflexive verbs. And a past participle, which will agree in gender and number with the subject. Okay, so it won't change entirely, it won't be conjugated like this one here, which changes completely to match this. It will agree like an adjective with the subject. So if the subject is feminine, you add an E. if the subject is plural, you add an S. Let's have a look at the same verb in the negative form. So using reflexive verbs in the perfect tense in the negative form. So I've kept the same verb and I've written it out. Je ne me suis pas lavé. So let's have a look at the components. We have got the subject, the reflexive pronoun, the conjugated auxiliary, and the past participle, same as before. And I had to add the parts of my burger. Now, when we've seen this before, we always just simply said the patty, the meat patty is just a verb. Now, in this video, I've started saying conjugated verb because here you might be tempted to go, I've got a verb here and a verb here. Whatever do I do? And so this is the difference between just a verb and a conjugated verb. And so we're going to say conjugated auxiliary verb to help you remember. So not the past participle, even though, yes, you're right, it comes from a verb, we call it a past participle here. The auxiliary is what is conjugated. So to be even more precise, it's not just the verb that goes here, it's not just the verb that's the meat, it's the conjugated verb. And in this case, the conjugated verb is called the auxiliary in the perfect tense. So conjugated auxiliary goes here. My cheese is my reflexive pronoun. Okay, one of my little toppings inside my burger. And then on both sides, we have the two parts to create the negative. We have ne and pas. So let's have a look at the word order, which is in a very logical order from the top of my burger to the bottom. Okay, so we don't want to mix around the toppings. So we have the subject, we have ne, we have my cheese, the reflexive pronoun, me, we have my conjugated auxiliary, suis, then we have the next bun, pas, and then we have the past participle, which is not part of my burger actually. So let's say it's the plate under past participle. Je ne me suis pas lavé. Okay, so I can imagine what you're thinking now. You're like, oh dear, that's a really complicated order to remember. I'll probably mess it up. I might forget one of my buns, or even worse, I might put it in the wrong place. So I've come up with a little tip for you to remember in which order to write it and to say it. So here is our word order. I've created a bit more space. And so I was thinking, right, subject, well, it will depend, but we're always going to have ne. Then we're going to have this here. Then we're going to have pas and past participle. Right, so let's think. As you know, I'm a very, very imaginative person. And so let's say we have ne. And I was like, okay, right, we've got reflexive pronoun, auxiliary, so P and A would be pas, 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 ne 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 pas, pas, pas. So, yes, I hope this sticks in your head. It is a bit silly, but the sillier, the easier to remember in general. So this is the order in which you're going to want to use it. You're going to be practicing this week, ne pas, pas, pas. And if at any point you don't quite remember, just go back to these videos, rewatch. They're not that long, and just take your time when you're writing out your short sentences, and eventually it will start just making sense in your head, and you will remember the right order. And if you say it in the wrong order, you will hear that it's wrong. Okay, so enjoy.